Have you ever watered your plant faithfully every single week out of pure love, only to watch its leaves slowly turn yellow, then dark, then completely collapse within just a few days? What if I told you it's not because you forgot to water it, but because you loved it a little too much? Today, I'll show you how to bring almost any dying, overwatered plant back from the very edge of death in record time. There is a small, often overlooked secret, a single, completely natural ingredient sitting right now in your kitchen cabinet that will stop root rot dead in its tracks and let your plant breathe again. Forget everything you've learned so far about watering schedules. Be sure to stick around until the end, because I will also reveal a widespread myth that is secretly drowning your plants right now. Let's dive right in and change your plant world forever. For generations, gardeners have quietly understood something that most casual plant owners today have completely forgotten. Root rot is not some rare disease that strikes unlucky plants. It is by far the single most common killer of houseplants in the entire world. Far more plants die from too much love than from neglect. In nature, rainfall comes and goes, and soil dries out between storms. But in a small plastic pot on our windowsill, water has nowhere to escape to. It just sits there, silently drowning the roots. Modern gardening advice loves to hand out rigid watering schedules, but nature never followed a calendar, and neither should we. Today, we are bringing back the old, forgotten knowledge that lets us read what the plant is actually telling us, and more importantly, how to save it once things have already gone wrong. Let's start right away with the absolute biggest frustration factor that almost every single plant owner has experienced. You water your plant right on schedule, every Sunday like clockwork. And what happens then? After a few weeks, the leaves start turning a sickly yellow. Then they go soft and translucent, and eventually the whole stem collapses in your hand like wet paper. But what exactly is happening beneath the soil surface? Most people mistakenly believe that a wilting, droopy plant simply needs more water. However, this is a very widespread and dangerous misconception. A drowning plant looks almost identical to a thirsty one. The leaves droop either way, but underneath the soil, the roots are suffocating in waterlogged, oxygen-starved soil, and fungal pathogens are having an absolute feast on the weakened tissue. The roots are like a person trying to breathe underwater. If the plant no longer has any oxygen reaching its root system, rot always wins in the end. Just imagine standing in a puddle of stagnant water for weeks on end. Your skin would eventually break down too. To avoid this fatal mistake from now on, we must transform the soil back into a living, breathing environment. And exactly at this crucial point, our first natural ally comes into play, completely changing the game. It is something that almost every one of you has sitting in your own kitchen cupboard right now. I am talking about ordinary ground cinnamon. Yes, you heard that absolutely right. A simple pinch of cinnamon can make the difference between a plant that quietly dies and one that fully recovers. Many people are initially skeptical when they hear this. They think of cinnamon as nothing more than a baking spice, but here we must immediately dispel a huge myth. Cinnamon is not just a warm, sweet flavoring. It is an incredible natural fungicide that has been used by traditional gardeners for centuries, long before there were expensive chemical treatments from the garden center. If you dust a small amount of cinnamon directly onto the exposed, damaged roots after trimming away the rot, or lightly sprinkle it into the top layer of fresh soil, something absolutely remarkable happens. The cinnamon forms an invisible antifungal shield around the vulnerable tissue. But let's take a closer look at what science says behind this fascinating home remedy. Why exactly does cinnamon work so well? The main reason? lies in the natural antifungal compounds it contains, which specifically target the exact pathogens responsible for root rot. Fungi like Pythium and Phytophthora that thrive in soggy, oxygen-starved soil. When roots sit in waterlogged soil for too long, these silent fungal invaders move in and begin breaking down the root tissue from the inside out. Cinnamon acts here like an impenetrable firewall, stopping the fungal spread in its tracks. Without burning or damaging the plant's delicate tissue, it is the exact opposite of harsh chemical fungicides, gentle enough to use directly on open, damaged roots. But cinnamon is not our only secret for absolute success. There is a second, almost even more powerful ingredient that will help oxygenate suffocated soil and revive drowning roots. If you happen to have a bottle of ordinary hydrogen peroxide sitting in your bathroom cabinet, then you are literally sitting on a rescue remedy for your plants. Hydrogen peroxide is not only useful for disinfecting small cuts on our own skin, but when diluted and poured into waterlogged soil, it breaks down into pure water and oxygen right at the root zone. This oxygen burst is exactly what suffocating roots desperately need. It's almost as if we were giving our plant's root system a shot of pure oxygen straight from an emergency tank. So, how do you apply this method correctly in practice? It's super easy. Mix 1 part of standard 3% hydrogen peroxide with about 4 parts of room temperature water. Then, simply pour this mixture slowly into the soil the next time it needs watering, allowing it to soak all the way down to the root zone. You will hardly believe how quickly a struggling plant perks back up. It is an absolutely fascinating process to watch. This method also has a wonderful side effect. It kills off many of the anaerobic bacteria responsible for that foul, swampy smell coming from overly wet soil. That is pure chemistry in the service of nature. Here, we absolutely must clear up another very big myth that the gardening industry likes to keep alive. Very often, colorful advertisements try to convince us that we need to buy expensive chemical fungicides in plastic bottles to save a rotting plant. That is simply wrong for most home situations. These synthetic treatments often contain harsh chemicals that can further stress an already weakened root system. And if you use too much, you can burn the remaining healthy roots and finish off the plant yourself. Natural alternatives like cinnamon and diluted hydrogen peroxide, on the other hand, are gentle and forgiving. They work in harmony with the plant's own recovery process instead of overwhelming it with a chemical assault. Now, we have talked a lot about remedies, but we must not forget the absolute basic element that accounts for 80% of success. We are talking about knowing when to water in the first place. If you simply water your plant on a fixed schedule every single week, regardless of conditions, you might already be making the first serious mistake. Every plant, every pot, and every room has different drying rates. The old finger test is still the single best tool we have. Push your finger about 2 inches down into the soil. If it still feels damp, wait. If it comes out completely dry, that is your signal to water. A simple wooden chopstick pushed into the soil and pulled back out works just as well. If soil sticks to it, the plant is not thirsty yet. Another fascinating detail is the invisible factor of oxygen in the soil itself. Roots need to breathe, just like the roots of a cutting in a glass of water. That sounds strange at first, since they live underground, but it is the absolute truth. If soil stays constantly saturated for weeks, it gradually loses all of its air pockets. The soil becomes dense and waterlogged and literally suffocates the roots living inside it. Therefore, it is an absolutely fatal mistake to keep soil perpetually wet, believing you are somehow helping the plant. You have to let the top layer dry out between waterings so fresh air can be pulled back down into the soil. If these secrets have changed the way you look at watering your plants, then subscribe to our channel. We unearth the methods that modern industry often wants us to forget. Let's plant the future together. The next green treasure will be revealed soon. Don't forget to leave a like on the video.